Late at night, in Japan, February 2004. A train slides quietly along the suburban rail lines, cutting through black mountains and sleepy towns. Inside the carriage, the neon white lights cast a sickly pallor on the faces of its weary passengers. Among them is a young woman identifying herself as Hasumi. She flips open her clamshell cell phone, an icon of that era. Instead of texting a friend, she chooses to share her experience with the sprawling Internet Forum 2 channel, or 2Teach, a digital labyrinth where millions of Japanese voices collide each day. Her first words are deceptively simple, typed into the void. I boarded a regular train home, but it's been over 20 minutes, and it still hasn't stopped. Strange. Does anyone know what's going on? At first, the post barely draws attention. Commuters sometimes overshoot stations or timetables slip off course. But something about Hasumi's tone, curious yet unsettled, makes readers pause. It doesn't sound like a joke. It sounds like the beginning of something uncanny. Beyond her window, darkness stretches endlessly, broken only by fleeting clusters of distant lights. The train barrels forward relentless without announcements or stops. Hasumi types again. It's been over an hour now. I should have reached Hamamatsu ages ago. What's happening? The 2Teach crowd reacts as 2Teach always does, with mockery memes and half-serious superstition. Some quip, she's on a train to hell. Others whisper of the demon's line. Japan has always lived with urban legends lurking just behind the rational facade of modern life, and the setup here reads like the first act of one. Yet other users sense something different. Hasumi is steady, consistent, descriptive, not like a troll, more like a witness narrating in real time. Factually, 2004 marked the height of 2Teach's influence, a chaotic hub of truth lies and myth-making. Scholars still argue whether Hasumi was a real commuter, begging for clarity, or an ingenious storyteller weaving a live horror thread. Investigators and internet historians are still debating whether she existed at all. The image endures a lone young woman inside a near-empty train car, fluorescent light humming overhead, wheels screaming against the tracks, time stretching longer with every passing second. Picture her reflection in the glass, pale, anxious phone clutched tight. She doesn't cry for help. She doesn't call the police. She simply narrates as if transcribing a journal for strangers. And then a shift. Hasumi posts that the train is finally slowing down. The hum of the motor fades. Over the speakers, static crackles, but no clear announcement follows. The train stops completely. She writes, I just got off at a station called Kisaragi, but I've never heard of this place before. Does anyone know it? Readers freeze. Kisaragi doesn't appear on maps. It doesn't exist in railway schedules, no trace of it in official databases, a phantom station witnessed only through her words. For some, this is the dividing line before a mundane transit mishap after the birth of a new Japanese legend. Users scramble. One suggests maybe she misread Kisarazu, a known city in Chiba Prefecture. But Hasumi insists the sign is clear, written in hiragana Kisaragi. A chill moves across thousands of unseen readers, their eyes locked to glowing CRT screens. A girl stranded at a station that does not exist, posting her final words into the night. And so begins the case of Kisaragi Station, the ghost station of Japan's digital folklore. The platform stretched into silence, a barren strip of concrete, lit by dim orange lamps. Hasumi described the scene with unnerving clarity. The station was deserted, no staff in sight, no passengers disembarking alongside her. She typed into her phone, there are no station attendants, no shops, just one platform, empty and cold. On the 2Teach thread, the tone shifted. Jokes gave way to speculation. A few users urged her to retrace her steps and board the train again, but by the time she looked back, the carriages were already gone, rolling off into the darkness, swallowed by the night. Hasumi was alone. Her next messages grew tighter, typed quickly. There are no schedules posted, no maps, just a rusted bench and a single sign. Where is this place? The audience on Tukik swelled rapidly. Dozens became hundreds, then thousands of anonymous onlookers, each refreshing their screens, gripped by this digital unfolding. Factually, Japanese rail systems are models of precision. Trains rarely deviate from established routes. That's why Hasumi's story hit so hard. It contradicted the very reliability of the system people trusted. Investigators and folklorists are still debating whether the story tapped into a cultural nerve, the fear that beneath the order of modern Japan lies chaos waiting to erupt. Hasumi's posts painted the station with cinematic unease. The lamps flickered, the silence pressed in. There was no ticket gate, no stairwell leading out to a bustling city. Just the platform, a dark tunnel at one end, and faint hills rising in the distance. The smell of old wood and rust carried on the cold night air. She mentioned hearing something faint, a rhythmic clatter, echoing beyond the tunnel, like distant footsteps or perhaps metal striking stone. Her words, "I can hear something down the tracks." It doesn't sound like a train. The forum erupted. Some urged her to stay put. Others insisted she leave immediately. Someone joked, "It's the conductor of the underworld coming to collect the late passengers." But beneath the humor was rising tension. Readers were no longer detached spectators. They were participants in a collective nightmare, each response pushing Hasumi further along a path no one could verify. And then she revealed a detail that chilled the crowd. There's no exit. I walked around the platform. The only way forward is into the tunnel. The Kisaragi Station thread ballooned into one of Tuchi's most active conversations that night, a living transcript of fear unfolding in real time. The anonymity of the forum blurred the line between performance and reality. Yet the effect was undeniable. Readers felt trapped there with her staring down that tunnel. One user suggested she call the police. Hasumi answered plainly, "I tried." They laughed at me. They said maybe I'm drunk. They told me to go home. That single message turned the atmosphere from eerie to sinister. If her lifeline to the outside world was useless, then the only connection she had left was the thousands of strangers refreshing her words. The clatter in the distance grew louder. She typed again, "I'm scared," and the forum held its breath. The night deepened. Hasumi's words flickered onto the thread like a weak lantern light in a pitch-black cave. She described the tunnel's entrance, a yawning arch of concrete, its surface dark with mildew, the mouth of a beast waiting for her step. She hesitated, then typed, "There's nowhere else to go. I'm going to walk through." Readers erupted with frantic responses. "Don't go in. Stay on the platform. Wait until morning." But her replies made it clear there was no morning here. No trace of a clock, no indication of time passing, except the steady beat of her own fear. "The air feels heavy," she wrote, "like the whole place is pressing down on me." She entered the tunnel. The thread captured every stage of her progress. Hasumi described her footsteps echoing unnaturally, bouncing back as if the tunnel were far longer than it should be. She tried to steady her nerves by counting her steps, but the numbers soon dissolved into panic. The sound that had been faint before now seemed closer, a dragging metallic scrape, uneven like something being pulled across stone. Factually, Japan's train tunnels are often meticulously engineered with safety exits every few hundred meters, but Hasumi mentioned nothing of the sort, just endless concrete walls and the damp stench of water trickling somewhere unseen. Investigators and detectives are still debating whether this detail proves the account was fiction crafted too perfectly to unsettle, or whether it hinted at a hidden, abandoned line lost to memory. Suddenly she wrote, "There's someone here." The thread froze. Thousands of readers stared at that single line, unable to look away. She clarified, "I can hear footsteps behind me, slow, heavy. They stop when I stop." The responses multiplied. Some screamed at her to run, others begged her to confront the figure. The strange consensus among readers was that she was no longer alone, and if this wasn't a prank, then the situation had tipped into something truly dangerous. Hasumi's next messages became fragmented, hurried. "It's a man, old, clothes like a soldier. He keeps asking what I'm doing here." His voice is strange, drawn out, like he's speaking through water. She didn't answer him. She only kept walking, reporting each sensation, as though typing might shield her from the reality pressing in. The soldier followed. One user suggested she ask his name. Hasumi typed back, "I tried. He won't answer. He just keeps repeating, 'This is not the place for you.'" Cultural scholars later pointed out that Japan has countless ghost stories involving spectral soldiers, remnants of the Second World War, lingering between life and death. A figure in uniform inside an impossible station fit neatly into that tradition. Yet others argued this was simply too neat, too archetypal. Regardless, the thread no longer read like a curious anecdote. It had transformed into a serialized haunting, each post arriving with the same suspense as a horror film scene. Finally, she typed, "The man is gone. I didn't see him leave. I turned, and he wasn't there anymore." But the scraping sound is louder now. It's coming from ahead. Hasumi was deep inside the tunnel, far from the phantom station, further still from anything recognizable. Her audience sat glued to their screens, watching her words drip like water in a cave. The sensation was collective dread, shared across thousands of strangers united by one thought. Something was waiting for her in the dark. Hasumi's updates slowed, as if each step into the tunnel weighed heavier on her. She admitted her hands were trembling so badly that typing had become difficult. Yet she kept posting, because her audience on 2Sketch had become her only lifeline. "If I stop writing," she typed, "I'll be completely alone." The scraping sound ahead grew clearer. Not random, not chaotic. It carried rhythm, almost like dragging metal chains in measured intervals. Sometimes it paused, as if listening for her. Sometimes it resumed closer than before. The tunnel seemed endless. Hasumi described walls slick with condensation, faint rivulets of water running down to her ankles. There were no maintenance lights, no safety alcoves, just her tiny phone screen casting a weak glow against the void. In reality, Japanese tunnels are rarely so neglected. Even disused tracks often carry residual lighting or warning markers. The absence of all such details unsettled many. Investigators and folklorists are still debating whether this was deliberate narrative tension or whether Hasumi had somehow slipped into a place that was never meant to exist. She typed another message I can hear, whispering now. More than one voice. Ahead of me, around the bend. The thread exploded with reactions. Some swore it must be local pranksters hiding in the dark. Others argued the phenomenon resembled classic Japanese ghost lore murmurs of the dead trapped in liminal spaces. Hasumi herself didn't speculate. She only wrote, "I don't want to keep walking, but there's nothing behind me anymore. The station is gone." Her readers refreshed, furiously watching her words unfold with the unbearable pull of a live broadcast. This was no longer entertainment. It felt like surveillance, a collective witnessing of someone's unraveling. Minutes passed without a post. Then I see light. Her description was strangely precise. A faint, reddish glow pulsed from around the curve of the tunnel. It wasn't fire. It wasn't the clean light of electric lamps. It reminded her of embers breathing, swelling faintly with every second. She inched toward it, her words clipped and frantic. It smells sharp, like iron, like blood. The glow revealed a wider chamber. Hasumi described what looked like an underground cavern, stone walls, raw and uneven as though carved by hand. The train tracks disappeared into the earth, here swallowed by rubble. And then she saw them, figures, standing against the walls, unmoving, dressed in clothes that seemed outdated kimonos, stained with dust, uniforms that resembled farmers or laborers, each face obscured by shadow. She counted at least a dozen before her panic overtook the words. They're not moving, they're just watching me. The thread's participants were transfixed. Their replies cascaded. Run! Scream! Don't look at them! Bow and apologize. Yet Hasumi typed only one more message before her screen fell silent again. One of them is smiling. The cavern swallowed her words, and thousands of strangers sat frozen, waiting for the next flicker of text, realizing the line between the world they knew and the one she had stumbled into was beginning to dissolve. For nearly half an hour there was nothing. The thread went quiet, leaving readers staring at the stagnant screen as if willing it to move again. Some refreshed the page compulsively, others filled the silence with speculation, theories, nervous jokes. But under all of it, a collective dread simmered. Everyone knew the girl inside the tunnel wasn't finished. She would type again, or she wouldn't. Then the words appeared. I'm still here. They moved. Hasumi explained that the figures in the cavern had not stayed frozen. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they shifted their stance, turning their heads toward her. Their faces, once obscured by shadow, were now clearer under the ember glow. She described their expressions as vacant, drained like mannequins that had learned to breathe. One detail unsettled the readers most. Hasumi said the figures all seemed familiar. Not in the sense of recognition, but in the uncanny way strangers sometimes carry fragments of someone you once knew. She typed, They look like neighbors from my childhood, people from my old school, but wrong. Their eyes don't blink. The thread lit up with panic. Some users insisted she must be hallucinating from exhaustion or carbon monoxide common in enclosed tunnels. Others argued this was the hallmark of Yurei Japanese spirits that borrow human forms to disarm the living. Investigators and folklorists are still debating whether this detail was a clever insertion of folklore or a chilling indication of real psychological breakdown. The figures began to step closer. Hasumi wrote in frantic bursts, They're walking toward me, slow, dragging their feet. Their mouths are open, but no sound is coming out. The scraping noise returned. Only now she realized it wasn't metal on stone. It was the figures themselves dragging something heavy as they moved. The glow flickered, casting twisted shadows that danced against the cavern walls. Readers begged her to flee. Go back to the station. Turn around. Don't look at them. But her next line sealed the sense of claustrophobic doom. The tunnel behind me is gone. The path has collapsed. I can only go forward. She described the air growing thicker, as if every breath was being shared with these silent watchers. Their smell was overpowering, damp soil rust, the staleness of clothes left too long in a grave. She pressed herself against the wall, inching forward, reporting every heartbeat through her keystrokes. Then came the strangest detail of all. One figure reached out not to grab her, but to point. Its arm rose stiffly, bone-thin fingers extended toward a narrow passage beyond the chamber. Hasumi typed, They want me to go there. They're all looking at it now. The audience was split. Some urged her to take the path to escape before the figures closed in. Others begged her to resist, fearing it was a trap, leading deeper into some inescapable nightmare. But Hasumi, exhausted and cornered, wrote only, I'll go, I don't have a choice. However, her final words of the night arrived moments later, fractured and hurried. The passage is smaller. I have to crouch, it's so dark. I can't hear them anymore, but I think they're following. The thread ended there, leaving her audience with the unbearable silence of a story unfinished, yet knowing that somewhere in the folds of an impossible tunnel beneath Kisaragi Station, Hasumi was still moving. Hasumi's silence stretched into hours. The thread, however, did not sleep. People from across Japan and beyond kept vigil, refreshing, posting desperate pleas. Are you okay? Answer us. Just one word. Some wondered if her phone battery had finally died. Others feared she had met the same fate as those nameless figures in the cavern. Then at dawn, her account flickered to life again. I'm outside, but it's not anywhere I know. The relief of her readers was instant, but it curdled quickly as they realized what she meant. Hasumi described stumbling out of the narrow passage into what appeared to be open air. Yet the sky was wrong. It was pale, but not like morning. More like a washed-out twilight, a flat canvas with no sun, no stars, no clouds. The ground was dry and cracked, stretching in uneven plains. A sharp wind cut across her skin, though she said she couldn't tell where it came from. No trees, no buildings, not even mountains in the distance. Still there was one landmark. In the distance, rising like a silhouette against the blank horizon, stood a cluster of torii gates, not just one, as at a Shinto shrine, but dozens stacked and overlapping, some leaning, some broken, forming a twisted forest of red arches. She described them as rotting, splintered, stained black in places. The paint flakes off if I touch them. The strangeness struck her gates meant to welcome spirits now abandoned in a place where no shrines stood. Folklorists would later obsess over this detail. Torii are thresholds, boundaries between the mortal and the divine. For Hasumi to find herself in a plain of torii gates suggested she had crossed into a liminal realm entirely. Investigators and detectives are still debating whether this was an elaborate invention or a subconscious draw from collective myth. As she approached, the wind carried a new sound, soft bells ringing. At first she thought they were shrine bells swaying in invisible breezes. Then she realized the tone was uneven, clashing like hundreds of bells ringing at once but slightly out of sync. The sound pressed against her ears, filling her head with nausea. She typed, "I can't stay near them. My body feels heavy. My legs hurt." But she also noticed something else. Between the torii etched into the earth were footprints, dozens of them leading away, pressed deep into the dust. Some were human, others were not. Her readers demanded she turn back, begged her to avoid following the trail. But Hasumi replied in words that chilled them all. "I think I see people ahead. If I can reach them, maybe I'll find help." She continued forward through the forest of broken gates, the bells clanging harder with every step. Her posts grew fragmented, each line shorter, as if she were running. "They're moving. I see them closer now. Their faces are covered, white masks, no eyes." The last message ended abruptly. They stopped. They're waiting for me. The thread froze again, and her watchers knew the pattern. Silence would fall, the world would shift, and Hasumi would return only when she crossed another boundary into the unknown. Hours stretched into nearly a full day. Readers began to fracture into groups. Some believed Hasumi's story was an interactive horror performance, a fiction delivered in real time. Others clung to the belief that they were witnessing a genuine supernatural disappearance unfolding line by line. The absence of her voice on the thread gnawed at both camps, and then suddenly she reappeared. I followed them, the ones in masks. She explained that the figures she had seen beyond the torii gates had not moved aggressively. Instead, they simply stood as though waiting for her to arrive. Their masks were plain white, featureless, except for slits where eyes should have been. The longer she stared, the more convinced she became that nothing lay behind those slits. Not eyes, not shadow, just emptiness. Still, when she hesitated, one of the figures raised an arm and beckoned, the gesture eerily slow, deliberate. Hasumi admitted she felt no choice but to comply. She followed them into a line like a procession. The ground beneath them shifted. At first, cracked earth, then coarse stone, finally smooth polished tile, as if they had crossed an invisible boundary into a place carefully built, not barren. Ahead, looming structures emerged, tall grey walls without windows, stretching farther than she could see. A gate weighted its wood, blackened its hinges, groaning as the masked figures pushed it open. Inside was a courtyard, wide and empty, paved with slabs of stone. At its center stood a single object, a shrine-like altar, small and low, its surface smeared with something dark. Hasumi swore it wasn't blood, it was too dry, too dusty, but its color made her uneasy. The figures circled the altar and stopped. She described how they turned their heads in unison toward her, as if waiting for her to step closer. She typed, "They want me to approach it. I don't know why. My legs feel heavy, but I think, if I don't, something worse will happen." Her readers flooded the thread with warnings. "Don't touch it. Don't go near it. Run!" But she didn't listen. She knelt beside the altar and noticed carvings on its base. They weren't Japanese characters. She described them as jagged, almost claw-like symbols etched deep into the stone. She tried to trace one with her fingers, and the bells began again. This time they weren't distant. They were inside her head. Hasumi wrote frantically, "I hear them, ringing inside me. My chest hurts, my hands won't stop shaking." The masked figures did not move. They simply stared as though watching her endure the invisible weight. She pressed her palms against her ears, but the sound only grew louder, shifting into what she thought were voices, whispers layered over one another, too many to follow, all urging her downward. She ended her last post of that night with a chilling line. "I think they're asking me to give something. A memory, a name. I don't know how." The feed went silent again, leaving her audience trapped between wonder and horror, questioning whether Hasumi had crossed into another realm or was slowly unraveling her mind under some unseen pressure. Investigators and detectives are still debating whether this point in her account marked a descent into psychosis, or whether it was the clearest proof yet that she had stepped fully into a liminal world. When Hasumi returned, her words came haltingly, almost broken, as though each sentence was pried from her fingers. The whispers stopped. "The masks are gone." She explained that the figures who had once stood around the altar were no longer there. She hadn't seen them vanish one moment, they ringed her silent the next. She was alone in the courtyard. Only the altar remained, and the strange symbols that pulsed faintly as though alive. She admitted she had tried to look away to close her eyes, but the symbols seemed to burn into her vision no matter where she turned. Then she noticed something else. The courtyard itself had changed. Where once there were blank grey walls, there now stretched endless rows of doors. Wooden iron sliding shoji doors, each one different, each one slightly ajar. From behind some she thought she heard faint sounds, weeping the shuffle of feet, or a soft lullaby sung off-key. She wrote, "They want me to choose. If I open one, maybe I'll get out. But which one?" Her audience erupted in debate. Some begged her not to touch any, fearing she would trap herself forever. Others demanded she open one at random, desperate to know what lay behind. The thread became a battleground of theories, a collective fever. Hasumi chose. She walked to a sliding paper door, the kind found in an old tatami room. Its frame was warped, its paper yellowed. As she slid it aside, a gust of warm air hit her face. On the other side was no room, just a field of tall grass swaying under a red sky. The wind carried the smell of iron, sharp and sour. She stepped through. Immediately the door behind her slammed shut. She tried to turn back, but the frame was gone. Only endless grass stretched around her, thick and knee-high, whispering with every movement. She typed, "It feels like the grass is alive, like it's brushing me on purpose." Some readers suggested she was dreaming, trapped in layers of hallucination. Others pointed out a chilling pattern every time Hasumi crossed a threshold station, to tunnel to plane to courtyard. Her surroundings became less like Japan and more like a realm stitched together from fragments of forgotten folklore. Investigators and detectives are still debating whether this indicated an elaborate staged narrative or a genuine liminal crossing into places uncharted. As she pushed through the grass, Hasumi saw shapes moving. At first, she thought it was the wind. Then a head lifted above the stalks, a human head, pale with black hair hanging in wet strands across its face. The mouth opened, too wide, stretching until it seemed to tear the skin. Another head followed, then another. The field was full of them. Her messages grew frantic, scattered with errors. They're crawling, bodies under the grass, faces everywhere, watching me, smiling. And then the last line of that night, I think one just whispered my name. Her watchers stared at their screens, knowing she would vanish again until the world shifted. Yet beneath the horror, a realization gnawed at them. Whatever she had entered was not random. It seemed to know her. When Hasumi returned, the tone of her writing had shifted again. There was fear, yes, but woven through it was resignation, as if she had stopped fighting the absurdity of her journey and begun cataloguing it with the calm of a reluctant witness. She described how the field of faces had not harmed her. They had watched, yes, their mouths stretching into grotesque smiles, their whispers tangling in the wind, but when she stumbled past them, they sank back into the grass, as though retreating into the soil. The air grew colder, and the red sky above slowly darkened into something closer to night. That was when she noticed a sound, wheels iron grinding against iron, a train. The noise carried across the field, faint at first, then louder, until the ground itself trembled with its weight. She pushed forward, parting the stalks, and at last saw tracks, gleaming silver rails that cut directly through the grass. And along those tracks came a train with no windows, its cars matte black, each door sealed shut. It moved at an impossible speed, yet made no attempt to slow as it thundered past. But in the blur of its motion, Hasumi swore she saw something behind the sealed doors, silhouettes pressed hard against the steel arms, straining faces distorted in silent screams. She typed, "They're inside. People, but not people. Their mouths don't stop moving." Her audience, reading in real time, spiraled into chaos. Some swore she had stumbled onto a vision of souls in transit, an afterlife carriage, a folkloric phantom train. Others argued she had finally cracked under exhaustion and was weaving nightmares into her account. Investigators and detectives are still debating whether this description mapped onto older Japanese tales of cursed trains, or whether it was an invention drawn from urban legend tropes that had already seeded the internet. The train vanished into the distance, leaving silence heavy in its wake. Hasumi lingered at the tracks until she noticed something new, a single paper lantern glowing faintly ahead. Its flame was weak, guttering, yet steady enough to mark a path. She followed. The lantern led her to a wooden station platform, half rotten, its planks soft beneath her feet. Above a weathered sign hung crooked, the characters faded beyond recognition. But she claimed she could just barely make out one word, Kisaragi. Her typing slowed. She admitted she wanted to cry, did too. For the first time since the ordeal began, she recognized something familiar, an anchor in a sea of distortions. And then she added a single, chilling line. But if this is Kisaragi Station, why does it feel like I've been here before? Her followers clung to that revelation. Had she somehow looped back to where it all began, or had the myth of Kisaragi Station pulled her so deep that even escape only led her back to its threshold? The thread once again went silent. When the silence broke, it was almost cruel in how calmly Hasumi returned. She didn't begin with panic or warnings this time, just a flat observation. The station is empty, not a sound, not even the insects. She described the platform in more detail. The boards were cracked, eaten by rot. Weeds sprouted through the gaps. The benches sagged under the weight of damp wood. And yet the clock above the waiting area ticked steadily, its hands frozen, at 2:33. No train approached, no staff, no commuters, no distant rumble. Just the weight of a place that should exist but didn't. Her audience, who had grown accustomed to her abrupt jumps between realities, sensed something different in this return. For the first time it seemed she wasn't moving forward into stranger landscapes. She was circling back, tightening into the heart of the myth. Hasumi wandered across the platform, running her fingers over the peeling paint, the warped sign. She tried to call out, shouting her name, shouting for help, but the sound seemed to die before it reached the edge of the tracks. Then she noticed a figure. It wasn't standing in the open, it was crouched beneath the staircase that led up to the footbridge, half hidden in shadow. At first, she thought it was another of the mask-faced figures she had encountered before. But as her eyes adjusted, she realized the face was bare. Human. Male. His clothes were tattered, his skin grey with dust. When he spoke, she swore his words came out backward, syllables warped as though rewound on a tape. Still she understood him. She typed his warning into the thread. Don't wait for the train isn't for you. Her readers exploded with interpretations. Some insisted he was a fellow wanderer, someone who had reached Kisaragi before her and had never escaped. Others claimed he was bait lure designed to push her into despair. Investigators and detectives are still debating whether this moment was a planted narrative device by Hasumi herself, a way to deepen the horror, or whether it aligned too neatly with older Japanese tales of yurei that offer riddles to the living. The figure backed into the shadows, disappearing completely. Hasumi admitted she wanted to follow him to force answers, but then a sound cut through her hesitation, the shrill, metallic screech of brakes. A train was arriving. Her typing grew erratic. No one here. No one else. But the doors are opening. She approached cautiously. The cars looked the same as before, black windowless, the air around them cold enough to sting her skin. Yet the doors opened soundlessly, inviting her inside. Her final words for that night. It's waiting for me. Should I step in? And once more, silence descended. The forum waited with bated breath. Minutes stretched into hours before her username flickered back into the thread. The new message was short, typed with a rhythm that betrayed trembling fingers. I stepped inside. She described the interior of the train. It was not like the sleek commuter cars of modern Japan, nor even the worn wooden cars of an older era. Instead, the space was barren, lined with metal walls that pulsed faintly as if they were alive. No seats, no windows, just a hollow corridor that seemed to extend endlessly in both directions. The doors shut behind her without a sound. The floor vibrated beneath her feet, but when she looked through the narrow cracks where windows should have been, there was nothing. No lights, no landscape rushing past. Just darkness, absolute and suffocating. Hasumi began to walk. her footsteps echoing in the hollow car. She typed, "Every step feels like I'm sinking deeper." Halfway through her account, she paused. Her next message chilled every reader who saw it. "There are others here." She described faint silhouettes at the far end of the corridor. At first, she thought they were passengers, ordinary commuters blurred by dim light. But as she moved closer, the details sharpened. Their faces were blank skin, stretched smooth, where eyes and mouths should be. They swayed in unison with the train as if tethered to its rhythm. Her audience erupted. Some compared them to Noppurabo, the faceless ghosts of Japanese folklore, who appear human until their blank visage is revealed. Others insisted they were echoes of souls trapped riders, repeating the same eternal journey. Hasumi's typing faltered. "They're turning toward me!" She admitted she wanted to run, but the car seemed longer now, the exit impossibly far. The blank faces drew closer, silent, their featureless heads tilting in jerks like marionettes with tangled strings. Then her words shifted, calm, almost detached. One of them reached for my hand, cold, not skin, not flesh, like touching fog made solid. The next line came faster, urgent. "They're trying to pull me with them." The forum lit up with panic. Strangers on the internet begged her to resist, to shout, to fight. But Hasumi simply wrote, "I can't tell if they want to hurt me or if they're showing me the way." Investigators and detectives are still debating whether her language here reveals something essential, whether she was confessing to exhaustion, surrender, or hinting at an allegory woven through her ordeal. And then her last line of that night. "The train is moving again." The screen went dark. The thread sat in silence for nearly a full day. By then, many believed Hasumi's story had ended for good. But then, without warning, her username appeared again, just a single sentence typed as though she had fought to get it out. "I'm still on the train." She explained that time had dissolved into something unmeasurable. Minutes stretched like hours, hours collapsed into moments. She could not remember when she last blinked, ate, or breathed normally. The only constant was the faint hum of the train vibrating through the metal floor like a heartbeat. Her followers leaned into every word, captivated. She described how the faceless figures had retreated to the far corners of the car. They no longer advanced, no longer reached for her. Instead, they sat cross-legged, their heads bowed as though awaiting something. Then she noticed it. The walls of the car began to flicker, shadows projected across the metal, like film reels spooling too fast. She saw images, streets she recognized from childhood, her parents' house, even her own reflection at age 7. They bled into one another, collapsing into fragments before she could focus. The most disturbing image appeared next, a blurred version of the platform at Kisaragi Station, but this time she was not there. Only the shadowy man she had seen earlier crouched beneath the staircase. He was pointing at the tracks, his face distorted, his lips moving silently. Her readers froze at her description. It sounded less like a haunting and more like a message. Someone or something was trying to show her where to look. And then, as abruptly as the visions had started, they vanished. The faceless figures rose in unison. They approached the door at the end of the car and stood silently as if waiting. Hasumi hesitated. She wrote, "The train is slowing down. There's a station ahead." The name flickered across her thoughts like static. She claimed she could almost hear an announcement, but the sound came backwards, syllables scrambled beyond recognition. When the train screeched to a stop, the doors opened. She peered outside her description, chilling and vivid a station, drenched in pale white light, so bright it washed out color. The walls were tiled but cracked, stained with something that looked like rust. No signs, no maps, just a blank platform stretching into infinity. The faceless passengers stepped off calmly one by one, drifting into the light as if pulled by unseen strings. None looked back, none faltered. She wrote, "Should I follow them?" Her readers begged her not to. Others urged her forward, desperate to know what lay beyond. The last thing she typed before the thread froze again: "The air smells like burning." I think this might be the last stop. Investigators and detectives are still debating whether this final phrase was a metaphor, a planned flourish to her tale, or evidence that she truly believed she had crossed into something irreversible. And then, silence. The silence that followed stretched for days. The thread, once alive with frantic refreshes and hopeful speculation, became a graveyard of unanswered questions. Some users swore they stayed up night after night, refreshing the page every few minutes, waiting for Hasumi's next message. But it never came. Yet the mystery did not end there. A week later, another user, anonymous, no profile history, posted a curious reply to the same thread. Their words were simple: "I saw her." They claimed to have been at a small rural station in Shizuoka Prefecture, where a woman stumbled off a late-night train, dazed, confused, and mumbling about a place that didn't exist. According to the poster, she asked repeatedly if this was Kisaragi Station. Station staff dismissed her as intoxicated, but the description matched Hasumi almost perfectly: a young woman in a cream-colored coat carrying no bag, her face pale as chalk. The forum exploded. Could this be proof she had returned, or was it just another fabrication feeding off the viral legend? Stranger still, a week after that, another anonymous account uploaded grainy photos, surveillance stills allegedly. They showed a woman sitting alone in an empty train car at midnight. Her expression was blank, her hands folded neatly in her lap. But the background of the car looked wrong. The windows were dark, and the interior lights had a strange, unnatural glow. Experts who analyzed the images argued endlessly. Some said they were doctored, pointing out inconsistencies in lighting. Others swore the pixelation hid details that might have confirmed their authenticity. But what unsettled readers most wasn't the photos or the claim of her reappearance. It was the final post from that same anonymous user. She told me the faceless ones didn't want to harm her. They wanted to guide her. They showed her something. She said they made her remember what she wasn't supposed to. The phrase sparked endless speculation. What could she have forgotten? A childhood trauma, a repressed memory, a symbolic message buried inside her subconscious. Investigators and detectives are still debating whether this suggests that the entire ordeal was psychological, an elaborate hallucination triggered by stress or fatigue or something that skirted the boundary of the supernatural. But the strangest detail came last. The user concluded their message with this chilling line: "She asked me not to tell anyone where she is now. She says the train can still find her." The forum shut down the thread days later, citing harassment and the spread of harmful urban legends. But for those who followed Hasumi's story from the very beginning, the mystery had only deepened. Was she still out there wandering some forgotten stretch of Japan's rail lines, or had she truly stepped off at a station that belonged to no map, no timetable, no reality we could understand? In the years that followed, the tale of Kisaragi Station moved far beyond the boundaries of a single forum thread. It seeped into Japan's folklore, circulating in late-night radio shows, television specials, and paranormal blogs across the world. Hasumi became more than just a username. She was a ghost, a cautionary tale, a symbol of how fragile the line between reality and illusion could be. But behind the spectacle, a quieter, more serious investigation unfolded. A small group of railway enthusiasts and amateur sleuths traced every night train route in Shizuoka Prefecture, hoping to find some clue. They checked abandoned lines, discontinued stations, and rural platforms forgotten by modern schedules. Some even hiked into the mountains to locate tunnels rumored to still exist, hidden behind brambles and rusted gates. One group swore they found a half-buried signpost with faint kanji markings that could be read as Kisaragi. But when photographed, the letters appeared smudged, too corroded to be conclusive. Was it a coincidence, or a fragment of a place erased from memory? Meanwhile, psychologists weighed in. They proposed Hasumi's experience was a vivid form of hikikomori, hallucination triggered by isolation, exhaustion, or internet addiction. The faceless passengers, a projection of urban alienation. The endless ride, a metaphor for life's monotony. The white-lit platform, a subconscious vision of death or the afterlife. These explanations comforted some, but for others they felt too tidy, too clinical. What unsettled skeptics most, however, was the detail. No one could explain multiple witnesses in different towns describing a woman who matched Hasumi's description, wandering disoriented near rural stations. Not once, but on several occasions, across several years. Each sighting ended the same way. She disappeared before anyone could approach too closely, as if the act of being recognized pushed her back into the shadows. One retired station attendant even claimed she spoke to him directly. According to his account, she asked a single question before vanishing into the fog. "Do you know what time it is where you are?" That question haunted him for years. He never forgot the way she emphasized "where you are," as though hinting that his time and her time no longer ran parallel. By now, Hasumi was less a missing person than a myth, yet the myth remained stubbornly rooted in tangible details, her posts, her words, her fear. People still debate, was she a clever storyteller who slipped away from the internet at the peak of her story, or a traveler who stepped onto a train that wasn't supposed to exist? Investigators and detectives are still debating whether Kisaragi Station was born from collective imagination, or whether somewhere in the folds of Japan's railways a ghost station waits for the right passenger. And if that station does exist, then Hasumi's last words still echo like a warning. The air smells like burning. I think this might be the last stop. Time passed, but the story of Kisaragi Station refused to fade. In every corner of the internet, new discussions emerged dissecting every line Hasumi ever typed. Some people tried to recreate her journey, deliberately boarding late-night trains from Shizuoka, hoping to stumble upon the station. None ever succeeded. Others swore they heard faint whispers in tunnels, or glimpsed stations with no names, their platforms vanishing into mist as the trains sped past. Journalists who revisited the case came to the same frustrating dead ends. Rail companies denied the existence of a Kisaragi station. Maps showed no evidence, yet the digital trail, the thread itself, remained stubbornly real. People could scroll through Hasumi's frantic words, watch her fear build line by line, and feel her slipping into a place they couldn't follow. In one unsettling twist, police records later revealed that no missing person named Hasumi was ever reported around that time. No family came forward, no workplace admitted to her absence. To officials, she didn't exist, but online she was as vivid as any ghost story. So what then was the truth? Was Kisaragi Station a clever hoax that preyed on our need to find horror in the mundane, or was it something far stranger, a portal glimpsed only by one frightened passenger on one unlucky night? Investigators and detectives are still debating whether the case should be filed under folklore crime or unexplained disappearance. The strangest detail lingers in the margins. Several users who followed the thread from the very beginning reported receiving anonymous direct messages afterward. Most ignored them. But a handful claimed the sender simply wrote, "I made it back," but not for long. None could prove those messages were real. None could confirm they came from Hasumi, yet for those who believed it was enough to keep the mystery alive. And perhaps that is the unsettling truth of Kisaragi Station, not whether it exists, but the way it forces us to question where reality ends and story begins. A train ride can be routine, predictable, safe. But maybe if you ride long enough into the night, you'll step off somewhere you don't recognize. A station not marked on maps, a place where faces have no features, a platform where the air smells faintly of burning. And once you're there, there's no guarantee you'll ever come back. Slowly now let the sound of the train fade from your mind. The screech of steel against steel softens, dissolves into silence. The platform lights dim. You are left only with the whisper of Hasumi's last words, fragile, broken, but echoing like an unanswered prayer. Stories like Kisaragi Station cling to us, not because they are terrifying, but because they are unresolved. They remind us how easily a moment of routine can slip into the extraordinary, how quickly certainty can dissolve into doubt. A train ride becomes a descent into another world. A flickering message board post becomes a testament to someone lost in the dark. Even now, as you close your eyes, there's a quiet unease in wondering if you were in her seat, staring out into the night. Would you recognize when reality shifted? Or would you, too, find yourself stepping off into a station that does not exist? The truth may never come. Perhaps Hasumi was a hoax, a digital phantom who lived only in our imaginations. Or perhaps she walked further than anyone should across the fragile threshold between this world and the next. The answers lie somewhere in that silence carried on the endless rhythm of the rails. So let's leave her there for tonight, sitting in the carriage, face pale, in the glow of the lights, hands folded tightly in her lap. Let her train ride on through the tunnels of memory, where the living and the lost pass each other quietly in the dark. Sleep well, and if you dream of trains tonight, listen carefully when the doors open. Make sure you know the name of the station before you step off. End of script. Good night.